Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Taking the Stand, where our mission is to inspire you by inviting VIP guests to understand what success principles they've used to find greater achievement. My name is Eric Bermudez, and I'll be your host. Welcome to today's podcast. Okay, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's edition of Taking the Stand. We are very excited to have a special guest with us today, Hamid Kohan, the CEO and founder of LegalSoft Solutions. Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Thank you, Eric, for having me.
Very excited for the discussion. You and I have had a couple of preparation discussions for today, and I think you're going to be able to share a lot of incredible insights, valuable nuggets that will really help legal professionals, but even outside of legal, I think you have some business ideas that can help a lot of people. So first and foremost, though, let me go ahead and introduce you. So Hamid, I'll go ahead and say that you are absolutely an expert in IT and IT services. You have decades of experience in Silicon Valley. Hamid actually worked with Sun Microsystems, HP, Hitachi, and most significantly spent 8 years with Eric Schmidt, who's currently the CEO of Google. So I imagine those probably were a lot of years of learning for you, Hamid. If you had to sum up in one word what that experience was like with Eric, what would that be?
It was an amazing experience working in the same company with him. He's an amazing person to follow. He's an amazing person as a leader and very knowledgeable in his field. Obviously, the result shows that he's done amazing thing in our industry.
And that was, I mean, he wasn't at Google at that time, obviously. So which company was that at?
Google didn't actually exist at the time. He was one of the vice presidents of software at Sun Microsystems, where I was one of the senior managers on the system side of things. And we spent a lot of good times together figuring out the next level of technologies and the things that needs to be done. And it was amazing working with him.
So currently, Hamid, you're the founder and CEO of LegalSoft Solutions. And LegalSoft is a partner of Filevine. So I know you've helped many of our clients in a number of different ways, and we're going to get into that a little more down the road. But you founded LegalSoft Solutions about 4 years ago. And one of the things that's interesting to me is you're exclusive to legal. You only work with law firms. You only work with lawyers. And help me understand why you made that decision to not go into other verticals. So many IT service companies that I've bumped into go outside of legal. Why did you decide to stay within legal only?
Sure. Coming from a high-tech industry background and all the, high-end technologies and implementations and integrations, when I was exposed to the legal industry, I noticed the huge lack of, technology, process automation, thinking outside the box, and being able to streamline the processes, reduce the cost of operation, which a lot of it can be achieved with the processes and technologies. So that's when we did the creation of the LegalSoft, not only focusing on the technology, but actually the practice of the law inside and outside of the firm. So our model was that while we allow the attorneys to practice law, we can actually practice the business side for them, including any of the IT and the software implementations, marketing, lead generations, and making sure that every aspect of the business side is taken care of and stays current with the latest technologies and the latest innovations and new ways of generating cases and leads and so forth, and keep a very tight, track on how things are happening, what's the current status, and what's the outcomes. So that's how we got exposed into legal industry. And honestly, there is enough challenge in the legal industry
Right.
that I don't need to look at any other verticals. I think I can do this for the rest of my life and not, be 20% done.
Right. Well, good. Well, again, I appreciate you being with us. It's obvious that you have a very deep background in experience, not only in the legal and in the business components of legal, but then also in technology with your background. So I think the connection of those two areas is incredibly valuable. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our agenda today. I'm excited to get into it. One of the things that really stood out to me as I've worked with you, I've engaged with you as we prepared for this podcast, is this notion that you always bring an element of thinking outside the box. You know, knowing much of your team, I know that you distribute that line of thinking to your team, but that also bleeds out into how you interact with your clients. Thinking outside the box, I imagine that you pose, different angles to solutions that maybe they had not have thought of before. And
Right.
so I wanted to dive into that a little bit. When you say think outside the box, or if you have a prospect client say that to you, hey Hamid, what do you mean? What comes to mind? How do you look at that differently, thinking outside the box?
Sure. Coming from the high tech industry, especially in Silicon Valley, every time we wanted to do something new, we always figure out what is not being done or what the problems are to be able to innovate and create a new solution or new technology and come up with something completely brand new, just like the whole Silicon Valley is about. When I came to the legal industry, I noticed that the mentality is opposite. It's like, let's try to do what everybody else is doing. Nobody is looking for anything new to create, to innovate, to identify. Everybody is basically chasing, the bigger firms and says, okay, they put up a billboard, let's put up a billboard. Let's say they did a social media, let's do a social media. So there is very little innovation and thinking outside the box. And let's figure out what is that the legal industry is not doing, and let's figure those things out and be first in them and win so others can follow. So this is a complete opposite of how I was, got experience working, is not to follow but lead. And the leadership comes with innovation and the new technologies and the new thinking outside the box.
What's interesting that you mentioned there is that uh, I imagine that a lot of consulting sessions, you sit down with the client and you look at what you want to do and then look at what your competitors are doing. And it's almost, hey, let's look at that first. And how can we do that, but maybe do it a little bit differently, almost copying the competitors' plans. And it almost sounds like the opposite approach of you and your teams is that you sit down and say, let's make a list of everything that you know, or everything that you think has worked in the past, or what your competitors are doing to achieve results. And let's put that on a piece of paper. And then the first thing you do is crumple it up and throw it away and say, let's do what everyone else is not doing. Or let's not just follow what our competitors are doing.
Exactly. More than the opposite, that more than half of our conversation is about them stop thinking that way. That look, my competition is doing this, so we need to do it. My competition is buying that billboard, buying that media ad, doing that advertisement, and let's do that. And my concept is not let's not do that. Let's find a new ways, which is more efficient, less expensive, and is innovative to do.
One thing that also came out as we talked about this idea of thinking outside the box is, I mentioned, okay, so we all agree that that's important. How do you get there? One thing that you mentioned is it's crucial for your clients. You work with your clients to have this 3 to 5 year plan. And although we know that wrenches are thrown in that process, and if you say in 3 years this will happen, that's never going to happen. But the idea of just simply thinking in 3 years ahead, I think forces you and your client to probably have that important discussion and be innovative and think outside the box. Um, you also mentioned a budget plan and some of these ideas, but what other ways do you help your clients think outside the box? Sometimes it's hard to get someone else to do that activity.
Sure, absolutely. One of the first things that it comes to mind, again, it goes back to the high tech mentality that we did not do anything without a plan, without a budget, without research. And when I walk into any law firm, from solo practitioner to a large law firm, I said, "What's the plan?" There is no plan. What's the budget? There is no budget. So what are we going to create? We don't know. So if we start from, okay, we need to have a plan, we need to have a recipe, and we need to have targets to be met. And once we're meeting those targets, when we know we're successful, and we obviously adjust everything to meet the targets. But it starts with actually planning, and the big discipline is to me managing them to the plan. So we stick to the plan. That's number one. Two, when you say about thinking outside the box, I always ask them, is this the practice type that you want to be in? Why are you practicing 15 different things when you can't even handle one practice type? So people are doing personal injury, employment, consumer protection, bankruptcy. You can't. You don't have enough resources. You don't have a plan. So I try to narrow them down and get them focused on what their core competency is and be able to have a budget in place and a plan to grow that practice. Most of the practices that I've been involved with for the past 3 or 4 years, they more than doubled year after year because the discipline
Wow.
comes in place that holds them to that commitment. And the discipline is almost like coaching and implementing. So we put that in effect with most of the law firm. Doesn't matter if it's a solo practitioner or a larger law firm. And the other part about thinking outside the box, I don't know why, again, going back to high tech, there is no boundaries of we only, support California or New York. It's a worldwide, entire planet gets supported. But the law industry always been restricted because they're licensed to specific states. There are many ways to expand outside the state and be able to practice in multiple states. That is, I have implemented it, shown great results. So still thinking outside of your area, outside of your state, and outside of your practice area to be able to have that expansion in place.
That's interesting because almost it's counterintuitive. I mean, a lot of people think, well, in order to increase revenue, I probably need to expand my service lines and offer that. And what you're saying is, first, let's make sure we specialize. Choose one and become the expert and the best of the world at that one thing, and your revenues are going to increase. And it sounds like you've had experience in working with clients. It's in the results that actually happens.
Oh, absolutely. We have had great success with a lot of practices, again, from solo to established firms, that we have reduced their cost of overhead and then we have expanded their operation outside of the state in the same practice area. I had a firm going from one state and having fully operational in 5 states with a fully staffed locations in less than a year. And it is very doable. Again, you just have to have the mindset, the discipline, and the plan in place to get it done.
So this leads us to our second segment here, which is you lending us a little bit of knowledge and insight into how you look at the business of law. One thing that you mentioned earlier in terms of LegalSoft is that you and your teams come in and almost take care of the business of law, so that way a lawyer and a case manager, they can work at the top of their license. They should be doing what they went to school for 8 years doing. And then you can come in and help them with all the business components and get that infrastructure solid. If there was one gap that you see most consistently from client to client to client, what's the largest gap that you typically see when it comes to that business side of a law firm? And the second part to that question is, what do you do to fix it?
Okay, the biggest gap is that the lack of information to measure the outcome of any of the operation parts. So if I ask any of my clients, what's your cost of case acquisition for your firm? They have no idea. And then I will say how much you're spending on social media, on the website, on the SEO, and so forth, and how does that translate into specific cases that I can point out to. They don't know that. Okay. And then I ask them, what is your net attorney's fees from the cases? And what is your gross margins? The things that the typical businesses would monitor in the practice of law is basically being retain a client, do the work, get a check, I'm happy. In my industry, that doesn't work. He said that there is always a lot more to get, a lot more to be made, and a lot more to expand to, if you have the discipline and infrastructure in place to do that.
Got it. So simple as knowing your numbers,
Knowing
knowing
your
where leads and
numbers.
cases come from.
Exactly. We track everything to the teeth. We know the exact cost of case acquisition in the firm. We know the exact overhead, distribution. We know the exact net attorney's fees made from every single client and average it out. And we know what the budget is required to expand the firm from point A to point B.
Got it. Okay. So you've already kind of talked about this a little bit in terms of how LegalSoft helps law firms. But if we dive into that a little bit more, how else or what other ways that you help law firms achieve greater success, whether they're Filevine clients or any law firm for that matter?
Sure. In a way of the Filevine, since we operate everything about data, is one of the best places to collect all the data necessary for us to be able to make intelligent decisions. So Filevine is a great tool to be able to collect, monitor, and generate those reports that people like in my team need to make the adjustments to the practice and to the processes and increase efficiency and productivity. All comes from data, and the data comes from Filevine. So that's number one. The number two is be able to expand again outside the box when we're looking at how to expand it through acquiring solo practitioners who are basically exhausted from all of this challenge of running a practice. Or the firms that are actually on the way out and wanting to retire and they want to close shop and retire their practice. All of that is a fair game to be utilized to expand your practice. And we manage and implement all of those areas.
Got it. Okay. And no, that's very, very helpful. I mean, it is all about the data. I think we're entering an era of business where it's becoming more and more data driven, right? Now that we have the technology, now that we have the software that's provided the capability to capture that data, oftentimes we need great coaches and great mentors and people and companies like yourself that can come in and help those practitioners actually get better by understanding what the data is, number one, and then what to do about it, number two.
Exactly.
So is there one example of kind of a case study that you're most proud of in terms of working with a law firm that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of those area was the practice that was well established, and the managing attorney was essentially very exhausted running the operation. So we went in, we broke down the firm into 5 separate units. We expanded in 5 locations of the state and made them an individual, independent operation as part of one firm with their own specific P&L and requirements and targets. So now the managing attorney basically spends 1 to 2 days a week just doing case reviews for each unit, and we manage every unit by numbers only. Okay, so the number of new cases signed up, number of new referrals, the average settlements, average attorney's fees, and we expand the firm from location to location with the same mentality. So it doesn't all have to be in one building, in one area, so now they're all separate P&L and increase the profitability of the firm by 46% because it also reduced all the overhead that was not necessary.
That's great. Well, look, appreciate it, Hamid. Thank you so much for joining us on today's show. For anyone interested in connecting with Hamid or the entire LegalSoft team, feel free to reach out to your Filevine representative or simply email engage@filevine.com. We would be happy to put you in touch with Hamid and his team. Like I said, great partner of Filevine's. We've now worked together for quite some time. And you've already worked with 2 to 3 dozen Filevine clients and helping them with some of the things we've discussed today. So from the whole Filevine team, thank you, Hamid, to you and the LegalSoft Solutions team. That's it, everyone, for today's edition of Taking the Stand. We'll talk to you next time on the podcast. Thank you, Hamid.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate the time.